Today we're putting on the HydrosPlus kit on my 1 Series John Deere tractor to improve hydraulic flow. Hopefully it is as promised. I believe it will be. We're excited to get into this. So that being said, let's try not to break something. So this is what makes up the kit. Got the hydraulic pump on the right. We've got the flow divider and diverter. And if you look at the bottom right facing the hydraulic pump, that's the actual valve that allows you to manipulate the flow. And then we've got 3 hydraulic lines. At the top is the line that goes from the pump to the new diverter. Bottom left, I believe, is the steering implement line. And the one in the middle is going to be the one that goes to the implements themselves. Bottom left, a couple of fittings. One to attach to the implement line to allow the two of them to mate. An extra bolt that will help me secure the flow divider. And the left one are 2 new bolts to support the pump, and the 2 existing stock bolts will also be used. So to get started, we're going to remove the seat. It's not difficult, there's just a lot of little things that got to be removed, and it's kind of a pain. Let's speed this process up a little bit. Now I'm removing my differential lock pedal. Got it from boltonhooks.com. They're a great resource for pretty much everything that should have come on the tractor but didn't from the manufacturer, and a bunch of other really pretty cool accessories as well. What? That's not good. Let's get it jacked up and get that tire off. Whenever you're using a floor jack, you should always use a jack stand, just in case it fails. These white mats are called pig mats. They're designed to absorb fluids. Because I'm not expecting a ton of fluids to drain here, I'm using the mats instead of a drain bucket. Gonna try from the top. So right now I'm removing the implement circuit from the stock PTO valve. The PTO valve contains a 50-50 proportioning valve that equally distributes the hydraulic oil between the steering circuit and the implement circuit. the way the HydrosPlus kit works is it actually installs a new adjustable flow proportional valve. I'm going to call it a diverter between the hydraulic pump and the PTO valve. This new diverter, it feeds the implement line directly with a higher proportion of flow, and then the other side of the diverter gets routed back to the stock PTO valve, which provides the flow to the steering circuits and to the PTO clutch engagement circuit. A little bit later, we'll see the actual proportioning valve that's removed from the PTO valve. To ensure that all the fluid that goes to the PTO valve is now making its way to the steering circuit, since it is a reduced flow coming off of the HydrosPlus diverter. I've got to say, I'm pretty impressed with what Kevin at HydrosPlus came up with. It's a pretty cool kit, and overall I've got to say the quality of all the components really is top-notch. So now I'm starting the process to replace the main feed off of the hydraulic pump, and I'm going to use the stock pump to get the new line in place, and then we'll go ahead and take that off and put on the bigger pump a little bit later. Nothing super exciting here, it's really just getting two fittings to come apart and then ensuring that I don't spill too much oil all over the tractor. Myself, I'm used to wearing it. Now I'm removing the main hydraulic line coming off the hydraulic pump. To do this, there's actually a bolt on the top of the transaxle that has to be removed, and the seat bracket, which is what I'm removing now, has to be removed as well. However, as you can see, I had to try to get it out without removing that bolt first, unsuccessfully. Even that bolt needed some extra persuasion. Ta-da! I'm using the stock pump for placement of the new diverter. Right now I'm installing an elbow on it, and what that elbow will allow me to do is put the new primary feed line in place, and then I'll hang the diverter off the primary feed line to get placement for where it's going to be mounted. What I'm doing now is using the new HydrosPlus hard lines to hang the HydrosPlus diverter in its mostly final location. I'm going to take the backhoe subframe at this point, hang it up, put a bolt in it, and then I'm going to use a paint marker to kind of outline where the diverter is going to sit on the backhoe subframe. Because the new diverter sits in between the backhoe subframe and the main frame and is actually mounted to the backhoe subframe, marking the backhoe subframe in the correct location takes a little bit of effort. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to use a paint marker and essentially trace on the subframe where the diverter is going to sit. And then I'll take the subframe back off, take the diverter back up, line it up, and then I'll have where my hole needs to go. Not looking for absolute precision here. Within a millimeter or two should get me where I need to be. There's a little bit of flexibility in the hard lines. Now with everything disassembled, we can see where it lines up. I'm going to use the center hole in the diverter and put a punch in it, make a mark in it, and then start drilling. Deburr the hole, do a little bit of test fitment, take it back off, and we'll get it mounted on the side of the tractor. Now I'm removing the flow divider from the PTO valve. It's a large nut that's on the top that you actually have to kind of beat the socket onto the top of it to get it to fit properly. You don't want to strip it, there isn't much room, and it's painted in place after it's installed. And there it is. Obligatory slow-mo shot for some good effects. What I'm doing now is putting in the two plugs that HydrosPlus kit supplies. The one I'm tightening now is the old implement output from the diverter, and the one on top is where the diverter the flow divider actually was that's no longer needed. Here's a top-down view of the PTO valve. The silver plug in the top is where the flow divider was. Now I'm struggling to get the implement feed to the tractor connected to the HydrosPlus hose. I will eventually get it, but man, this one is a frustrating endeavor. Let's speed it up. There's the installed diverter. It's hanging there by the hard lines, but they're all tight, and that's essentially where it'll end up being. Next is to install the backhoe subframe. So now we're putting the backhoe subframe on. The hard part really is done at this point. Well, probably. Hey look, another bolt-on hooks product. I love that step. Now I'm taking that fancy paint marker and marking the bolts. That way I can ensure that they haven't moved after a couple hours of use. pump replacement time. To do this, there's the suction hose elbow that needs to be removed, the outlet hard line needs to be removed, and then there's 4 bolts on the back of the pump housing. Hey Abby. Hey Penny. Hey Mrs. Maker Breaker Fixer, otherwise known as Mrs. Breaker. So right now I'm taking the elbow and the main feed line off, and then the next steps are going to be to remove the 4 bolts. The 2 at the top that are actually not the top ones, but the ones below the top bolts, and then there's 2 at the bottom that are kind of near where my ring finger just was. With the bolts out and the hose is loose, just grab it, give it a little bit of a wiggle, and off it comes. There's a coupler that mounts in between the transaxle and the pump itself, and I'm going to go ahead and take it off the pump and put it back in the transaxle. That way I don't lose it. Installation of the new pump is basically the exact opposite of the removal. Put the coupler on the pump, take the pump, put it in place, and by putting it on the suction hose and with the coupler on the back of the transaxle, it stays in place and you don't have to worry about it falling. Take the 4 bolts, the 2 new long ones, and tighten it up. Put the outlet elbow fitting on and the primary feed line off the pump on, and you're basically done until you have to put it all back together. But hey, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. It really does help support the channel when you guys like and subscribe. We're always working on new stuff, so check back often, and stay tuned because there's some entertaining moments coming up. Before putting the tractor back together, I'm going to go ahead and do a leak test, which will involve starting it, running it at idle for a little bit, looking for leaks, increasing the RPM, looking for leaks, and finally going wide open throttle and looking for leaks. So far, so good. No leaks, so I'd say we are good. Let's put it back together. Lug nut torque spec for the 1025R is 89 foot-pounds. Let's try this again. What a day. We're done. No leaks. Everything looks good. Everything's put back together. Let's see what it'll do. So this is idle. No complaints. We're going to call this one a wrap. And, as far as I can tell, didn't break anything. Have a good one, everyone. Be the person your dog thinks you are.